I haven't put the rear window in yet. I'm not sure whether I put that in before or after I do the upholstery, so I'll just have to have a look at that. Not sure, but the upholstery comes, at least on this one, the head lining is the same as the material that comes down around the rear window. Now, in another body I have the remnants of the upholstery on the interior had this as a vinyl from the head lining down, but certainly this one, the 49, had the cloth upholstery coming down to the tops of the top of the rear seat there. Along the side here, that was a vinyl. So anyway, I'll start with the head lining and get that in. That basically tacks off at that row there. It's not that easy, but getting the right measurements is the problem. So I'll probably come in here and measure the distance between the slats. Now at each slat there will be a seam in the head lining, and then a seam is put there so then you can tack the upholstery up onto that roof timber. So you've got to get the measurement right, otherwise it'll end up loose between the one slat and the other. So I'll just go and pull all the pieces of upholstery together and see what I've got and see what I need to do. Now I've been able to piece together a few items out of the original upholstery. These were the sections between the doors, covered with vinyl. Unfortunately the top end of the timber is rotten, so I'll probably have to replace the timber, and of course I'll redo all of these, and new vinyl. So I've got a piece from each side of the car. These pieces here covered the what I call the D windows, the rear side windows. The timber on those is laminated, starting to come apart, so I'll have to repair those before I reupholster. That one's just starting to come apart. This one here is in better condition, so apart from a little bit of separation there, so a bit of glue there. I do have a couple of other ones which are in worse condition. These are off other cars, so they're all laminations have come apart on that one, so I could probably use the original pieces with less repair, so I've got those. This piece here, this goes across the front of the car. That's where the speaker was for the radio. I'll be putting that back in, so I've got that piece, that's okay. Just need to clean it up a bit. Now, this was the head lining. Just a straight cloth, not a very thick cloth, but of course it's rotten. It's very easy to tear, and what I'm hoping to be able to do with this is use it as a pattern. Now, these are the seams I was talking about before. where it's put up onto the timber. You can see where it's been tacked on. All the original tacks are there. So I've got to look at this. I think that's the front end. Or maybe it's the back end, I'm not sure. Haven't undone it all. No, there's the centre where the light went. I'm not sure what this is. That was obviously tacked up. Maybe this is the front. I'll have to work out which is the front and which is the rear. So that's no problem. The other pieces I have here, I can find them. Right. Separate those two. This must be the rear. This is where the steel support is across the back of the car, holding the seam up. So I've got to put a seam in so I can slide this bar through. So I've got that. And all of these pieces are trim along the sides of the car. And I've got to make sure that the timber on those is okay. It appears to be reasonable, but I'll need to check those. This one's not, this one's snapped in two. So that's got to be repaired. And this section is well, it's a cover which goes across the back of the car above the window, and it covers the seam between the head lining and the piece that comes down on the window. So that I have. The timber's not great, so I need to be careful with that. And of course there's the rear window. These pieces of timber go along those rear quarter windows. They're there to help support some timber, dressed timber. I've got at least one of those. I may be missing one. I need to look around for the other one. So do I have it? Oh, is this it? No, that's it. So I've got a piece for either side of the car. I'm going to put those in there, quite serviceable. They can go back in. So I've got enough to work on. I should be able to get a good pattern off the remnants of the headlining. But I'll take some measurements just to make sure I'll put the seams in exactly the right places. Just waiting on a new seal for the rear window. It doesn't seem too hard to put in, but it looks as though it has to go in after the upholstery, because there's a timber piece that goes on the inside that screws in to hold that in place, and that's part of the upholstery, so I need to look at that as well. Anyway, I'll start with the top. Don't worry about these other bits yet. Alright, working on this headlining. This is part of the headlining. Now, I've worked out that it's been made in 3 pieces, 3 separate pieces, which are actually installed at different times in a particular sequence. This is the centre piece of the headlining where the roof light goes. Quite simple to make. I've just been back into the vehicle, crawling inside, taking some measurements just to recheck. And the reason for that is when I took this out I may have ripped a bit more than I was intending to, so I need to get the right width, but even so I'll probably make it a little bit oversized. The sewing process in the centre is extremely simple. I've just got to put some large pleats on the inside, and these are actually tacked up into the timber on the roof, so they're just straight sewing across there, so that's not a problem. There are two of those. It's tacked in two places with those particular pleats, and the ends are tacked up separately over the timber, so that's not a problem. As I say, I've looked at how this would go in terms of the sequence. This being the rear of the car, this pleat would be tacked in first, followed by the pleat in front of it. This end actually folds over the timber and tacks on the inside. Now, where this finishes, so it finishes basically like that, this piece here, this is the piece that goes up just behind the windscreen. Now, this is actually a detachable piece. Now, when I say detachable, not easily detachable, but it's got clips, so this pushes up into clips that are mounted on the rear of the front timber support and the roof, and this is where the windscreen is. Now there's another piece that a filler piece that comes under this and screws into the wood, so that holds that in place, and of course that's the radio speaker. Now on this I actually did find a pencil notation that says fawn. I assume that was meant to be the colour that this was originally, so that's an original marking. So this is the one out of the 49. This piece is quite simple. I've also got that as a template. This is it here. This just goes over the top. And the sun visors screw into this. Now the 49 didn't have, as you can see there's no hole there, didn't have a speaker in it, but one of the other cars I have, or relics of a car I have, did have, so I've got a speaker to go in that, and I'll put a radio on this one. So this is only just a case of cutting and gluing to the board, so that's not hard. And then there was a third piece which I just got in the garage, haven't brought out here yet. It goes with the rear up to the rear window, but it's a little bit more complicated. I've got to work out how that tacks in. So that'll be the last piece I'd make, because on the back edge here, I don't know whether you can see it on the video, but you might see that there's difference in colour between the headlining that faces down in the car and this piece here. This is close to its original colour. Now, there's a piece of timber that slips in behind this thin piece of timber that folds over it, and this whole piece, hard to say, that's the roof up under there, and this whole piece tacks in behind the timber, so the roof line comes, try and explain it, it comes along like that, and then it angles up towards the roof. And then the next piece of lining comes, it's set back here. So this appears over the rear seat. So it provides more headroom over the rear seat. And to the extent of whatever that measurement is. So it's 30mm higher. So not much, but it's a step of about that much. So it's that much more headroom over the rear seat. I'm just going to do a little bit more research on how that tacks in place, but it certainly doesn't stop me cutting this headlining, this centrepiece, and sewing the pleats in. I can do that, and I can certainly do that, and that's what I'll start with. So the process is about to start. It won't take long. I'm just going to make sure the measurements are right. I don't cut things too short. I've finished sewing the centre part of the headlining. These are the bits that mount on the timber. So that's above the headlining. This is the front section. That's the middle. This is where the interior light will be, and that's the rear. The rear at the moment I've cut that over length, and also it's a bit over length in terms of the width. I'll just roll this up to keep it clean. There's a couple of creases in this. These creases were caused by the fact that I got this headlining mail order, so it was all folded up. So I'll leave this line in this condition, so it tries to flatten out, which it will, so that's not a problem. What I'm going to do now is that let's close that up. There's the other pleat, the rear. So that's a mounting point as well. Now, I can't put this on straight away because I've actually got to put some insulation into the roof. It originally had, not kapok, some form of Hessian-y material to provide a heat sink above the headlining. I'll be using a modern sort of adhesive version of that, so I need to put that on before I actually tack in this into place. What I'll start when I've done that, I'll be tacking this and this into place, so it's really only the centre section. The rear I'll leave loose, and the front I'll leave loose at the moment. And the reason for that is that I've got to make the other pieces to start with, and I've got to figure out in terms of the rear how that will actually hold this final piece at the back. As I think I've mentioned before, the headlining goes along at the rear and it steps up into the roof line by about, I think it was 30mm or something like that. So I've got to work out how that's done. There is a piece of timber that goes inside this. I don't know whether I've got it. Yes, here it is here. It's unfortunately it's broken. I've got to repair this, but it goes up into that. There. So it folds around that and goes like that. I've got to work out how that, I think it was nailed through that with very, very thin nails. I don't like the idea of that. I may just screw that, just put some screws in place. I'm not too sure yet. And also what I've got to make sure of is how the other the other piece of the headlining comes along from the rear and comes in behind that, so I've got to work out how that's going to go as well. So anyway, a little bit of planning for that, but not quite ready for that. As I say, I've got to fix this. It's just broken in the middle, but should be able to repair that. So anyway, at this stage I've got to go and do the insulation in the roof, because I can't put this up until I've done that. I'm about to start stapling in the headlining. All the insulation's been put in place, so that's not a problem. I've marked across the timber where the top of the tab that I've made on the back of the headlining will go up to. Now the reason I've marked that is that the actual seam sits 9mm below the timber. It doesn't sit flush with the edge of the timber, so it's got to drop down a bit. And the reason for that is that once I staple this along here and the one that's just above the camera, which is a couple of rows back, it has the headlining in its basic position, but to tighten it you've actually got to pull forward and back, and by having it down below it enables the seam to move backwards and forwards and to be able to get it tight. So anyway, I'm going to staple it. I've got an air staple gun, which is just down on the floor here. It's a lot easier to do that than use tacks. It's bad enough sitting in here on a stool as it is, because your head doesn't quite clear the roof. So anyway, I've got to start tacking. I'll start in the centre. It actually tacks behind there's a piece of timber that comes across here to hold the interior light fitting. So it actually tacks behind that. So I'll start tacking this across. A few cuts I'll have to make to the tab to get it in. It's got to be cut to go around these timbers here. So I'll do that progressively as I go. Anyway, I'll start stapling it now. I've started to put the headlining in, just the centre section. I've stapled the two ends to the bars up in the roof. It's a lot easier to staple than it is to tack. Even so, it's getting difficult to get in and sort of work overhead. It's taking more time than I was anticipating. I'll now bring this section forward onto this bar and tack that up, but at the same time I actually have to position these. Now these are the brackets that enable the front section here, the removable piece, to push up and clip in. So I've got quite a few of those to put in, and they actually have to be in the correct position. So it's going to take a while to tack this up and also screw those into the right place. But that will then enable me to put this this front section in. Now what I'll be doing is pulling this towards the front of the car to tension it. I can get a fair amount of tension pulling that way, and then when I finally do the rear one, I'll be pulling that back to get as much tightness I can into the roof lining there. So it's a long way off finished, but it's getting there. This front section is now complete. I've put those clips in. Hopefully they're in the right position. The sides I haven't finished yet, and the reason being is that I've still got to pull this rear section back. I'm not ready to do that yet. I'll probably do this piece next, this front detachable piece. I've actually got to go and cut and glue that, so I haven't done that yet. But it's coming along quite nicely. It could still be a little bit of more tension in that section there when I pull that back, but it's coming along quite nice.